Halliburton double team, shot clock at 4. Nembhard's got to put it up. Step back, his three-pointer. Bang! Nembhard knocks the three down. Timeout, Knicks.
Anthony attacks. Hibbert denies him at the rim. Block number 5 for the Pacers center.
Wow, what a play.
Miller for 3, and he got it. Reggie Miller with a clutch tray, and it's 105-102. And a steal. Miller retreats to the three-point line and hits again.
Tie game.
Reggie Miller made a 3, stole the ball, raced behind the three-point line, and hit again.
Look, I know people are like, aren't you worried about going back to New York City and calling a game? No. I've owned this city. I've owned this building. So why would I be worried about walking on out there?
Harper to get it in. Throws it to Ewing. Ewing surrounded. 2 seconds to shoot. He drives. He shoots. He missed. He missed. He missed. We ring the bell, baby. Ding dong. The witch is dead. And the Pacers have won it 97-95. And we're going to Disney World.
Hello, Pacer fans, and welcome back to the Pacers Fever Show, your go-to podcast for everything blue and gold. During this postseason run, and the Indiana Pacers are just one win away from the 2025 NBA Finals, where they will either take on the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they're looking to close out the series in Game 5 at Madison Square Garden on Thursday evening. Welcome into the show. If you're new here, we are on Spotify and Apple Podcast. If you are interested in the audio version, we're also over on YouTube. So if you want to check out the YouTube video over there, I do a rundown so you can actually see the notes that are coming in the rundown for the show. But if you're in the audio version, I do hopefully I do a good enough job of reading down the rundown, just because there's different talking points that I want to get to in each of these episodes. But if you're interested in the video version, again, we're over on YouTube at the Pacer Fever Show. Thanks again for jumping in and listening. We really appreciate the support so far. And this has been a magical run. The team of destiny continues to roll on. And after a really horrible loss in Game 3, a loss that left me shaken as far as just the confidence I had maybe in this team. And I think the rest of the fan base probably felt different waves of emotion as we went through today. And then after the game on Sunday, I think there were a lot of different feelings to have. And, there were a lot of people that were still confident in this team and their ability. But when you have that game in between, it's just, it's extremely hard. You just kind of sit around and think about what could have been. And even now you still think about what could have been, because the Knicks are still alive in this series. They're going to go down fighting. I mean, this is a team that has played the Pacers extremely close. This was actually, I think, the biggest Pacers win. So, this Knicks team is always around, and they're going to continue to fight and scrap and claw and try to take this series and win it in Game 5 to move it to 3-2 and put all the pressure on the Pacers to close it out in Game 6. And, a lot of things can happen in those two games that can really change things. If somebody were to go down with an injury or something were to happen where the Pacers just lose all confidence in 2 games, and then they go back to Game 7 and Madison Square Garden, hope that they can once again bury the Knicks in a Game 7 at Madison Square Garden. I don't think you continue to win there. So I'm really interested to see how they come out and perform in Game 5, because the Knicks, they have to win. It is a must win the rest of the way for the New York Knicks, which means desperation. And this Indiana team at times have had a difficult task trying to knock down a desperate team, because they come out and play really well defensively and tend to slow the Pacers down because they get into them really intensely. And the Pacers do struggle with that, with the physicality at times when they're trying to run an up-tempo offense and really getting the ball moving, and can't really break them down as well in the half court. And the Knicks are extremely lengthy whenever they play Mitchell Robinson. So again, anything can happen. Game 5, it wouldn't shock me if the Knicks came out and won that game, because they're going back home. They know they're fighting for their life, and that makes it even more difficult for the Pacers. And there's a lot of pressure there. I don't think the Knicks can beat the Pacers 3 straight games, but again, crazier things have happened, and a 3-1 deficit has not necessarily been a death sentence. Now, it's very difficult to win a 3-1 series, but it has happened, and we've talked about this in other shows prior to this one, just what a 3-1 lead means in a best-of-7 series. So just looking at that stat again, because I'm sure you're all interested in what that looks like when a team does go up 3-1 in a best of 7. And when that happens, that team that has gone up 3-1 advances 283 times out of the 296 times that has been an opportunity. So the team advances 95% of the time whenever they have a 3-1 lead. That's not 100%. That's not a perfect score. So that doesn't mean that the Knicks can't come back and win this series, and they will try to win this series. I don't think they're out of it by any stretch. The Pacers have to go in and take care of business in game 5, put all the pressure on them at home. And I think there is a lot of pressure heading back into the Garden to perform well. Jalen Brunson is going to give you your best shot, but I think you can try to make the other players feel that pressure, because while it is a home game, the Madison Square Garden faithful is a group that will be very critical of their team if they were to get knocked out once again by the Pacers, especially on their home floor. There's going to be a lot of question marks going into the offseason. This team probably doesn't look the same if they lose in this Eastern Conference Finals. I could see this team being a lot different next season, because I think that they would be willing to move some big pieces to try to bring in an even better player in like a Kevin Durant or something like that. So we will see that the Knicks will have tons of pressure in game 5. And again, that will be Thursday, May 29th at 8 p.m. Eastern time on TNT. And the Pacers will look to close it out. Game 6, we'll go through the schedule now. If Game 6 is needed, the Knicks will come back to Gainbridge Fieldhouse on Saturday, May 31st at 8 p.m. Eastern time on TNT. And then Game 7 would be the Pacers at Knicks, Monday, June 2nd at 8 p.m. Eastern time on TNT. So the Pacers will be playing into June, I think, for the first time since 2013 or 2014, I imagine, which will be an amazing feat if they can get to the NBA Finals. But again, playing that late into June, that means you at least got to a Game 7. Hopefully the Pacers don't have to do that. Hopefully they're playing in June because they're in the NBA Finals. We do not want to get to that Game 7, because that will have been a close to epic collapse. And if you end up losing Game 7, it was an epic collapse from the Pacers. But it's just such a special, special time for Pacer fans, for the city of Indianapolis and their hoops teams. I mean, you got Caitlin Clark with the Indiana Fever, you got Tyrese Halliburton with the Indiana Pacers, and these are two of the best players in their league at their position. And I think that the more that you watch Tyrese Halliburton, the more you watch Caitlin Clark, the more I think you get an understanding of just how special these two are going to be throughout their career, and how big the competitive window is going to be when those two are still in Indianapolis. So, I mean, I'm talking about in the future, Tyrese Halliburton, and I don't imagine they'd ever let Ty walk. So as long as he's here, this team's got a chance. And if he's healthy, this team is scary. And we've seen that time and time again. Whenever he's been out on the floor, this Pacer team is incredibly hard to beat. And the Tyrese Halliburton history continues. He continues to make more and more history. He does things that players have never done before, and tonight he added to that list. And I want to talk about just exactly what he's done in this game that has made history. And this has been tweeted all over. It was on the TV as I was coming in here to record the podcast and kind of making some makeshift notes. But usually after these games, it's just a reaction video, and we go through and talk about the really important players and key moments in the game that I thought really shifted the momentum. And the Pacers did a really nice job in a lot of different moments. But I did want to talk about what Tyrese Halliburton's performance was. And so we'll get to that as we get further into the show. But he was historic. And there's been a lot of conversation in national media. What does a superstar look like? And is Tyrese Halliburton a superstar? And he's never really been bothered with that conversation. I don't think, I mean, as far as, out in the public, he's never really said anything about it or addressed what that means. And to be honest with you, a lot of players don't. And he's very humble. He's not somebody that's going to come out and say, yeah, I'm a superstar. But he's very aware of what his capabilities are. And he always talks about this. He's very aware and self-aware of how good he is as a ball distributor, what he means for a team in the offense, and the abilities that he possesses and the skills that he possesses. He knows just how important that is to getting his team to win basketball games. And that's ultimately what Tyrese Halliburton wants. He knows at the end of the day, the stats aren't what matter. The accolades are nice. The history is nice. But at the end of the day, what he wants to do is he wants his team to win. And how does his team win? Well, Tyrese Halliburton doing what he does on a nightly basis at the high level that he does it. That's what you do to win basketball games. And he's, he always makes comments about that when people question his abilities. When that player poll came out and named him the most overrated player in the NBA from those anonymous players that voted on that in the athletic poll, I think it was the best thing to ever happen for Tyrese Halliburton and Indiana Pacers fans, and probably the worst thing to happen for everybody that's been a victim of Tyrese Halliburton on the court, because I think it's energized him. It's fueled him. He's not somebody that's going to go out there and start to pad his stats, but he's going to take all of that. He's going to be able to take it in and hone it in and then use it against everybody else that's in the way. And he's done that. I mean, he's taken all that doubt. He's taken all of the criticism and he just runs with it. He excels in tough environments. He wants the pressure. He loves the pressure. He likes when people doubt him. And I think that's what most of the Indiana Pacers have always been, and especially this team. All these guys up and down this roster, especially this roster, have been doubted. Even talking about the All-Star and NBA champion Pascal Siakam, who spent a lot of his time in the G League and was passed on and, was bouncing around in the G League and trying to make the team with the Raptors, and eventually does and becomes an All-Star and an NBA champion there, and then is shipped off to Indiana where he's a All-Star, and now he's got his team one win away from the NBA championship. Miles Turner constantly in the media about being traded, not living up to his worth. And, and Pacer fans have given him a hard time. And I think there's been a lot of mental things that Miles has had to battle through. And he's made that aware in his Player Tribune article, where he said that, it's been tough for him. The 10 years that he's been here in Indianapolis, that it's been extremely difficult, just because at every turn, people have challenged who he is and what he means to this franchise, and if he's a good fit for this city, and whatever they would throw at him. He was constantly in trade rumors, and the Pacers even threw a max deal at DeAndre Ayton, and that was going to spell the time, I think, for Miles Turner in Indianapolis. But luckily, the Phoenix Suns matched that offer, and they end up getting DeAndre Ayton, and Pacers keep Miles Turner, and it ends up being a hand and glove fit for a guy that has embraced this city, has always done well by this city. He's the most giving person that the city's had. And I think that he's just given his whole life to what this team is and what this city means. And I think that Miles Turner, at the end of the day, and when we're talking about it, and hopefully he's a lifetime Pacer, but he's also one of the Pacers that I think you have that conversation of putting his name and number up in the rafters at the end of the day, just because of all the things that he's been through as an Indiana Pacer, all-time leads or all-time block leader in Pacer history. And he just keeps climbing the board of most legendary Pacers. And that's pretty exciting for a kid that so many doubted. You go down to Andrew Nembhard and second round pick. So many people passed on him. Aaron Nesmith was sitting on the Boston Celtics bench and really had no place in this league. And then all of a sudden the Pacers trade him for Malcolm Brogdon, who ends up not being as good for the Celtics, and the Pacers get a steal with Aaron Nesmith. So it's just been time and time again, guys that they've brought in that have been passed on, that have been ridiculed or criticized. And I think that it's just propelled them to new heights. Tyrese Halliburton was never a high draft pick, he wasn't a high draft pick, and he was never considered a really good recruit coming into college. So again, this team has just been doubted time and time again. And the reason why I was going on that long-winded conversation, I guess, was just because the Pacers are always the underdog. They like being the underdog. They came into game 4, I think, with a lot of people talking about how they'd collapsed and they hadn't played well. They gave the Knicks the series back, that a lot of people were still picking the Knicks in 6, Knicks in 7. People thought it was going to be a 7-game series. It still might be, but everybody was doubting the Pacers again. And the Pacers were up 2-1 and had been a really good team for the last 2 games, probably better than the Knicks by a long shot in the last 2 games, but had not closed out the game in game 3 and let them back into it. Because if they don't let Karl Anthony Towns and the Knicks back into game 3, I think you're talking about a sweep tonight. And you're talking about the Knicks sitting at home while the Pacers await who they're going to play in the NBA Finals. But again, Knicks were desperate, and their last ditch effort and their last resort was Karl Anthony Towns, and Towns delivered in a spot that he needed to deliver and save the Knicks season, because we're talking about game 4 and in a game 5 because of Karl Anthony Towns. So again, I think the Pacers love when people doubt them, and they're going to continue to doubt them. And if the Pacers move on into this next series, if they meet up with Oklahoma City, everybody's going to pick Oklahoma City. They were the best team in the NBA. They look like the best team, and the Pacers will once again be underdogs. And all the Pacers need to really do is step in and win one of those games early on in that series. But I think the days of doubting this team are done from media and people that know basketball. Obviously, you're still going to have the talking heads at ESPN wanting the bigger markets, and they're all Knicks fans anyway, so they're always going to pick the Knicks or the Celtics. So there's a lot of bias there. And then if LA becomes good at some point in the future, they're going to lean LA too. It's just how it works, right? The Pacers are never going to get their roses, and we're okay with that. I think the Pacers have always thrived off of being the underdog. So long-winded to say, the Pacers did exactly what they were supposed to do, coming out, taking care of business, and pushing their lead to a 3-1 lead. And again, 95% of those teams move on. So let's talk about the game. I know there's a lot to talk about, so I want to get into it. But right away, I want to talk about Aaron Nesmith. So I think it was like an hour before the game, Shams had tweeted that I forget who, somebody had come out and said it. I can't remember who it was. I'm going to try to pull it up while I'm talking here. But there was a report out that Aaron Nesmith was good to go for game 4, and he was going to play. He was going to give it a shot on that ankle. And word came out as it got closer and closer for time to tip off. And the conversation ended up being that Aaron Nesmith was not only good to go, but he was feeling a lot better, and better than he thought he would have felt at this point with that ankle sprain. So he felt really confident in it. And I think to even go further and say that he felt like it was a lot better than what he had expected, I think that meant it felt pretty good for, considering the situation when I think he had something very similar happen to him. And he thought, man, there goes my season, because I'm going to have to sit out for the next 2 rounds, and I won't be able to play in the next couple, because I'll have to sit out a couple of weeks with this ankle sprain again. Like, I had something similar to me happen, in this regular season, and I had to miss 30 some odd games. But no, Aaron Nesmith came out and right away looked just like Aaron Nesmith would. There were a couple of times where you could tell where he's a little hesitant to put a ton of pressure on that foot, or like there were like some rebounds that he could have gotten to that I think he didn't try to go up and get. But there was one play, I think it was the second or third quarter. He went, I think it was the second quarter, and he goes flying for a dunk, and he dunked it all over. I forget who it was. I think it was Mikal Bridges, but he dunked it all over him and landed and looked totally fine and was pumped. And, a lot of times adrenaline can take you through some of that pain, but he looked really good tonight. Started the game early on, hitting his first 2 threes, and I thought that was huge, getting him going, getting that confidence going. And with a really good shooter like that, an ankle injury can lead to you not trusting it as much and not using your legs as much, which can cause your shot to do all sorts of things. But a lot of times you come up short just because you don't have the lift that you necessarily need to get the ball up to the rim. But his first 2 shots were money, and he shot 55% from the field tonight. So very typical of Aaron Nesmith. He was 2 of 6 from 3. He actually didn't shoot it as well from 3, but again, 2 early threes were huge, getting us started in that first quarter. And that was a key to the game. Obviously, getting out to those fast starts, but getting Tyrese Halliburton involved as quickly as possible as you can in games are crucial for the Pacers. And I think if you watch the Pacers enough in this season, or you're a Pacer fan, the importance of getting Halliburton out to these quick starts, getting him involved in the offense, because it can mean what it meant tonight for Tyrese. So again, Aaron Nesmith's contribution would have been missed tremendously, but just his impact on the defense against Jalen Brunson. At one point in the fourth, it was without Aaron Nesmith, it was like a negative 15. With Aaron Nesmith, it was like a plus 16. So you can tell the impact that Aaron Nesmith has on the floor, not only defensively, but offensively too. And you can tell when you're watching the offense, when the ball hits Ben Shepherd sometimes, or TJ McConnell, or Benedict Mathurin, or whoever's playing the number 2 or 3 spots, that it can stagnate sometimes. Whereas with Aaron Nesmith and Nemhard, they're so good at moving the basketball quickly, and they know how to get into the flow of the offense and get shots in the flow of that offense and run out in transition, get to the rim, create havoc on the defense as they're trying to crash to the rim, kick out, hit some 3-pointers. And it was just firing on all cylinders tonight early on. I mean, both teams were just unconscious from the field in the first half. Both of them shot over 50% in the first 2 quarters. But that first quarter, the Pacers came out and they were just absolute nails, as the kids would say, in this game. I mean, they were relentless on the offensive end. And so much of that you can attribute to just the ball movement and the ability of Tyrese Halliburton to get into the defense and probe, and the screens and flying up and down the court. You could tell in the first quarter there was an emphasis on getting the ball and getting it out of the basket and going. Even on made shots, missed shots, you're running the ball up the court. You're flying in transition. You're hitting that wing up the court in transition to get that offense started. And then the Knicks defense doesn't have time to recover. It doesn't have time to figure out what it wants to do. It doesn't have time to pick up assignments. There's a lot of interchanging on the court where bodies are flying everywhere, and you're trying to keep up with Halliburton because you know he can just take off towards the basket, but he could also step back and hit some deep threes. And then you have to take away the wings because Nesmith and Nemhard are flying down the court. And then you got Turner, who kind of trails, and Pascal Siakam gets ahead too. So you're in full panic mode. You're full recovery mode most of the time. Even on made baskets, there were times tonight where the Pacers, I won one particular. There was one where I think Brunson made a really tough 2-point layup, and right out of the basket into Tyrese's hand, and he threw it all the way up to Pascal, and Pascal gets an easy layup on the other end because the Knicks defense didn't have time to get back. So you have to be so aware when you're playing the Pacers that as soon as you make a bucket, you're sprinting to find your man. And that's the other part too, is that as the ball's going up, you're worried about trying to go get offensive rebounds, or you're kind of in like this ball, like you can't help it. It's a natural reaction. You kind of watch the ball a little bit. And then once that happens, I feel like sometimes the Pacers players, like if it goes in, I mean, they're already 2 feet ahead of their guy down the floor, and they have to fly back and try to recover. And it's just not fun. And they're doing it all game at 48 minutes. It's got to be exhausting. And you could tell at the end of games, the shots aren't made. A lot of 3-pointers are taken. You can tell they're short, they're long, and the Knicks tend to struggle. They were a little bit better in this game, I thought, as far as making shots in the fourth quarter. However, as the game started to go towards the end, like 3 or 4 minutes left, that's when you started to see the tired legs. The Pacers kept hitting shots. They got offensive rebounds. And I think it's just because the Pacers are fresh, right? They're getting to the rim easier. There's less stress on them because they've been so good offensively throughout the night. And again, I just thought the Pacers played the pace that they wanted to, and it was right from the start. They had 43 points in the first quarter. They had an 8-point lead. And I did want to talk a little bit about the way that the Pacers ended quarters. So I'm going to try to do this. I was trying to do this before the show, but it was just taking too much time, and I wanted to get this recorded so I could get off the bed. But the Pacers, at the end of that first quarter, at one point, it was 31-30 Pacers lead. They end on a 12-4 run in the first quarter. Pacers up by 8. Had a great quarter from Tyrese Halliburton. So looking at the first quarter stats, it tells a story. And for the night, it meant a lot for Tyrese because, again, like I said, when he's involved in the offense quick, when he's getting his shot up, when he's getting to the rim, that's when he's most effective. Tyrese Halliburton was 4 of 5 from the field in the first quarter. He played 10 minutes and 54 or 56 seconds. He was 3 of 3 from the 3-point line. He had 4 free throws, and he made all 4. He had 5 defensive rebounds, and he had 6 assists. Tyrese Halliburton almost had a triple-double in the first quarter. No, I'm kidding. But really, I mean, he had 15 points, 6 assists, and 5 rebounds after the first. He was dominating the Knicks. I mean, just everything he was doing, firing on all cylinders. Nesmith had 8 points. Siakam had 11, and that was really important because that was a key to the game that we talked about. Getting Halliburton involved early and then getting Siakam in the flow of the offense, because there's times where the Pacers kind of isolate Pascal outside of the offense, and then it's hard to get him back incorporated as the game goes on. I felt like the Pacers did a really nice job. They were very intentional about getting Pascal Siakam the ball in really good spots. He had a lot of good mismatches. Karl Anthony Towns couldn't guard him. And then there were times where Mitchell Robinson and then Josh Hart in the first quarter would be on him because Cat got in early foul trouble. So Josh Hart comes in, and Hart and Anunoby they can't keep up with Pascal for that long. Like, they can have good possessions against him and they'll make some good defensive plays. But at the end of the day, Pascal Siakam, his post game is just too good for those two. And their length and their bodies just aren't good enough to challenge Pascal. So again, Pascal had his way with the Knicks in quarter one. So did Tyrese Halliburton. And the Pacers were off to a flying start and shot 68% from the field. But the Knicks were just as good. They were 56% from the field. They shot 50% from three. They had 5 3-pointers. The Pacers hit 6 of their 8. So they were staying pretty close to the Pacers, even though the Pacers had this crazy start. And that was pretty key because I feel like if the Knicks, don't shoot as well in this first quarter, that they would have struggled to keep up with the Pacers the whole game. And this could have been a blowout because of the way that they came out in the third, the Pacers. So absolutely crazy first quarter. And then it got even worse in the second quarter, just because the Pacers did start to come back down to the mean, but the Knicks continued to hit their shots, and it made the game extremely close. And then at half, the Pacers do have the advantage, but in the second quarter, there ends up being a time where it was 51-51, and they were both shooting at 50% or above 50%. They were all hitting their shots, hitting threes from everywhere. The Knicks were starting to get to the foul line, and Jalen Brunson was starting to get a feel of what he was doing in the offense. He didn't play that well in the second quarter. He only played 4 minutes when he did play, but you could kind of tell that's when it started to kind of shift. And then all of a sudden, Karl Anthony Towns started one of his quarters again. He had 12 points. He was 3 of 4 from the field. The Pacers couldn't guard him. He got to the foul line, and it felt like Brunson was very active in the first. Towns was very active in the second. They weren't really playing minutes together, which we've learned that that's more effective for the Knicks when those two aren't on the floor together, which is a problem. Like, that's a problem they're going to have to address in the offseason, and they can try to make it work for this series. But even if they got to OKC, I feel like OKC would sweep them right out of the gym, just because OKC would exploit every problem I think that the Knicks have. And the Knicks have a lot of problems. And when your two best players cannot play on the floor together because they cannot defend, that's a problem. And that's why I think that the Pacers do what they're supposed to do and knock this Knicks team out and advance to the finals. This Knicks team will look different, just because I think either they're going to have to figure out a way to bring in somebody that's just so good defensively to pair with Towns and Brunson, or they're going to have to really consider maybe moving Towns again. And we'll see. I mean, if they do keep them, I think it's just a detriment to this team, just because, one, they're not very deep. I mean, they've had some pretty good production off the bench. Shamit's been pretty good. DeLon Wright's been pretty good. Miles McBride's been pretty good. But Thibodeau you can tell, like, there just becomes a point where he just doesn't trust them enough. Even though they're playing well, something about his trust with his bench players, it doesn't reach the maximum. And that's a problem if you're trying to compete against a team that's constantly playing 8 to 10 players all the time, like the Pacers are. And the Pacers play 10. So, yeah, I think 8 that'd be manageable for the Knicks, but the Pacers they bring you 10 players off the bench and they just run with every single one of them. So, you start to see the longer that a series goes on, the Pacers are more fresh. The Knicks are starting to get more banged up. OG Anunoby like turned his ankle tonight. Carl Anthony Towns like whacked knees with Aaron Nesmith, and it looked really bad. Like, and Towns had done something to his knee before. I couldn't remember exactly what he'd done, but it was in game 3. And then he was, he's kind of limping around in game 3. Game 4, he did something early on in the game where he grabbed it, and then he did it again, and then he was laying on the floor, like smacking the floor. I thought he was really hurt in that situation. But, and people are like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with how tired they are. But I think to an extent it does, just because they're not fresh. They're late to different places on the court, and that puts you in really bad spots and places that you could get hurt. And I don't know, it feels like as series have gone on with these Knicks teams, as they've gotten further and further into the playoffs, like last year, they completely fell apart. And I think it's because of how many minutes they play throughout the regular season. They get tired, they're exhausted, and that's when you can pull a hamstring, you hurt a back, you're slow to recover sometime, and you get hurt because you get caught up underneath somebody. You know, you you would think that because of last season and now this season, that the Knicks would go into this next off season and say, we really need to change the way that we are doing things. And I think if the Knicks get knocked out, I think Thibodeau's gone. I really do. And if they keep him, I just don't know if this team can really go to its next level, just because they're kind of stuck with the players they have because of the tax aprons. They're not great defensively. They are very exposed whenever they play good teams. And again, you saw the weaknesses tonight. They just couldn't get stops at the end of the game. That was it. The Knicks scored 30 points in the fourth quarter, but the Pacers scored 28. The Knicks could not put the clamps on the Pacers. And that's been the story for a lot of this game, right? And sorry, the series. So a lot needs to change for the Knicks in the next 28 to 40 hours, because the Pacers are going to come into game 5 and the Pacers can smell blood, taste blood in the water. And I think if they come out and keep the Knicks right there with them by halftime, I think the Pacers will have started to kind of wrangle the lead away from them, or the momentum. And the longer the Pacers can stay in it in game 5, I just think that they're going to be the better team and ultimately end the next season in game 5. But we'll talk about that in a preview episode that we'll do, and I'll record that tomorrow. We'll talk about what the Pacers need to do to take out the Knicks in game 5. There's not going to be a whole lot to really talk about. I think there's some things that they can do to make some adjustments, but I felt like if the Pacers play the way they did tonight, there were moments where it was kind of iffy, but I think a lot of that was actually just the rotations and lineups that were out there, because there are some lineups, I think, with the Pacers, you struggle to get some offense from. And I think that's something that they'll have to look at. And going forward, I think that they will consolidate this roster at some point, but I don't know what that looks like or who's involved in that, or if they do keep most of this core around. I do feel like there's going to be at least one left out, and maybe they start to shrink down a rotation to 9 players. But there's just times where, there's lineups out there with just one starter. That can't happen in the playoffs. As good as your bench can be at times, and as good as that can be to kind of wear down teams because all those guys are fresh, I still feel like you got to have 2 starters out there with your bench players, because there's just so much stability in that. Whereas there's times where Turner's out there by himself, or Pascal's out there by himself, Tyrese is out there by himself, and you can tell it just kind of stagnates, because the other players just, they're very limited in some of the things they can do. And, Ben Shepherd can hit the corner threes, but he's not somebody that's going to take you off the dribble. TJ McConnell's not going to hit threes. He's not going to be able to really defend anybody besides, defend that well. He does some things defensively that are good, but there's times where he really struggles as well too. So I don't know. There's a lot of areas that you can attack with the Pacers, and And these teams that they play against typically do have two starters out there playing against a Pacers starter and their bench. So, I think that's when teams really do go on their runs. There was a time in the third and fourth quarter where that started to happen. Fourth quarter, definitely, where Carlisle just needed to get Tyrese Halliburton back in the game. I think it was like 8 minutes left. He should have had him back in the game, but he waited until about the 6-minute mark, I think it was, when he finally did get back in. I just, there's moments in these games where you're worried that the bench is playing a little too much. And I get that that's a strength. I get that depth is your strength, but a lot of times what I think you got to realize is there's an off season coming up. They can be tired then because you're at a point now where, like Carlisle says, I think they're in day 7 of 13 of the end goal, and the end goal is to win an NBA championship. And they've got 13 days of work left. And I think you do. You go into the next round. If you do go in the next round, you say, we can rest in July. We're going to exhaust our skills, our resources here. So we shall see. But yeah, there were moments I just felt like the Pacers get away from what they're trying to do in the pace of their offense because the bench players. But talking about that first half, it was constant pace for the Pacers. There's a little bit of a lull. The offense kind of goes cold, 43%. They only hit 2 of 8 from 3. They only shoot 25% from 3 in the second quarter. And that eventually lets the Knicks back in it just because they start getting to the foul line. Karl Anthony Towns is getting to the foul line. He's made 5 foul shots. He's hitting all of his shots. Hit a good 3 in that quarter too. DeLon Wright hit a really, really important 3. And the Knicks hung in there. I was really shocked because Brunson didn't really play much. And the bad thing is that the Knicks hung around so well with the Pacers in the second quarter. Brunson didn't really have to play. So they got more minutes of rest for Brunson. And when he's rested, he's a lot better, obviously. And he got only 4 minutes in that second quarter, as well as Mikal Bridges. So all their big guys are getting good minutes on the bench, and they don't have to play and exhaust their starters, which benefits them tremendously because the Pacers' biggest advantage is when they can wear those guys down. But because the bench unit was so good, the Pacers just don't have an answer for Karl Anthony Towns. And, they're not going to find one. Like they're not going to be able to do things against Karl Anthony Towns. However, I think now with that big limp he has, whatever happened to that knee, I think that's going to be a thing to kind of watch going forward. But I think also you can start to see him getting a little bit more exhausted at the end of games just because of how much he has to put into this. And he's got to be their scorer when Brunson's gone because the units that he's playing with sometimes, he just has to take it on himself to do the scoring. And in the second quarter, if OG Anunoby doesn't have 9 points, the next best scorer is Jalen Brunson, who only played 4 minutes and had 3 points. You have to look at DeLon Wright, who played 7 minutes and only had 3 points. So they're not getting a ton of offense from their bench guys. They're getting good defensive intensity. Like that's a good defensive unit with Landry Shamet and DeLon Wright and Miles McBride. Like they fly around defensively with Josh Hart, and OG Anunoby's really good defensively. Towns, not good defensively, but with that unit, again, they only really have to rely on him to do the offensive thing because the Pacers bench unit's in and they're not as good or offensively as, as expected. But I mean, the Pacers bench can still score a lot of points. And speaking of, that brings me to a couple of things that I want to talk about. So as we get into the third quarter, the Pacers go on this run and it's defense, and it's always defense. You can go back to every single Pacers game that they played extremely well and started to get that space between they and their opponent. And a lot of what happens is defensively. That's where they create that separation is on that end. And it turns in and translates into transition points, and it turns into turnovers. And that was a big problem for the Knicks. They struggled tremendously with keeping the Pacers off the fast break. The Pacers had 22 fast break points compared to the Knicks 9. Second chance points, Pacers were even with the Knicks. I feel like the Mitchell Robinson offensive rebounding energy thing has kind of been zapped and neutralized because Miles Turner's been really good at boxing him out, and Pascal's been good about getting the ball away from him when he's in. But Tony Bradley's been a big influence on just a rebounding game. Doesn't add really much, obviously, offensively, but I mean, he was much better, I think, as far as just because he didn't have to play as many minutes as Rick had him in the last game. But I thought Bradley was really good in the minutes that he played tonight. He creates a problem for Mitchell Robinson because he can keep him off the glass. Like Tony is that big, so he did really well. Pacers had 50 points in the paint compared to New York's 45. But like I said, 22 fast break points. And that was just because the Knicks had a real hard time hanging on to the basketball. And in the first half, they had 9 turnovers. They had 8 turnovers in the second half. They had 17 in total compared to the Pacers' 11. And the Pacers had 5 at half and 6 in the second. They were a little bit more sloppy in that third quarter where I felt like the Pacers could have buried them, but the Pacers kind of had let them hang around. And there were some moments where the Pacers, again, this is one critique that I have about this team. The Pacers will get up by 10 or 11, 12, and they've done this all season. They'll get up by 10, 11, 12, sometimes even like 8 or 9, and they just start to bomb threes because they think, well, if we hit 2 threes, we can really put them away. Like we can just demoralize them. But 9 times out of 10, it feels like they don't hit those threes. Like they missed 3 straight threes in a row. Luckily, I think it was Aaron Nesmith gets an offensive, somebody gets an offensive rebound off one of them. I think it was, no, maybe it was Pascal. But anyway, like they finally get an offensive rebound on one of the threes and they get fouled and they go to the line and make the 2 foul shots. But again, I think this team at times tries to go for a knockout punch in the third quarter. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like you have just, I mean, Tyrese Halliburton in the third quarter had just gotten to the basket like 2 times in a row, completely breaks down the defense on pick and, but then you go and just bomb threes. It just doesn't make any sense to me when the Pacers do that. And that's one critique that I really have about their offense at times. They just rely heavily on trying to hit shots in ISO and it just doesn't work, or they try to shoot threes really early on in the shot clock. And I know they try to get in a shot in the first 8 seconds of the shot clock, but sometimes I'm just like, that's just so out of rhythm. And it just gives momentum right back to the team after you had them zapped. So I don't know. That's just a complaint that I've had, and it happened in the third when the Pacers were going on a roll. I mean, they opened that quarter. I think it was a 7-0 run or 8-0 run, something like that they start that quarter with, and that essentially, like if I'm looking back at the key moment that changed the game, that was it. The third quarter when they came out, they turned the Knicks over a ton, right out of the gates. They had 5 turnovers in the third quarter, so that's where a bulk of their turnovers came from in the second half, obviously. And the Pacers just caused them all sorts of problems. They only had 3 in the fourth, but the Pacers defensively, they were much more engaged. And then there was a timeout where the Pacers had kind of gone on a run and the Knicks were, I think, down 8 or 9, and they come back out of a timeout, and the Pacers' intensity is just as good as it was when that timeout happened. I'm like, all right, they're locked in now. Like, they go on a 9-0 run, and now they're back locked in defensively after the Knicks had to take a timeout. Like, this team is starting to feel it. We're starting to feel real good, had a really good third quarter, and it really was the difference in this game, that third quarter, and the start to that third quarter, which, again, Carlisle is such a genius in the adjustments that he makes in a halftime, where I think every time we come out of a third quarter that the Pacers are going to grab advantage there. And they did 33 points in the third compared to New York's 27. It was the least amount of points scored in a quarter for the Knicks in this game. And the Pacers, again, just took it to them. And I felt like they really had a good chance to bury them as it got later into the game and into the third quarter. They end the third quarter, again, on a really nice run. So I'm going to try to do the math here because it was, I think they were up 6 at one point. Yeah, 6, 93 to 87. So 93, 87, 9. They go on a 9-4 run to end the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, they go on a nice run to end that quarter as well. So every single quarter, the Pacers end on a run, and just that's gonna be the deciding blow when it comes to, crunch time, when the Pacers are finishing out quarters, completing quarters in a way that it just takes the momentum out of. And I thought that the run they went on before the half, it was a 6-0 run, but I felt like that was a big change in the game. And then right out of the third, so it was basically like going on a 15-0 run, between the second and third quarter, which was the difference in this game. I mean, the Knicks eventually do get it back down to 6, I believe it was, but never, below that in the fourth quarter. And I just thought that the Pacers just played so well down the stretch. And so much of that is, again, Tyrese Halliburton and what he can do, what he can create. It's just, at this point, I think, we can keep talking about how much of a superstar he is. People don't understand how much of a superstar that he is, but his ability to change games and the way that he changed tonight's game should cement him as a superstar in this league. And this is kind of where we'll transition into it, because at the close of the game in the fourth quarter, it never really felt like it got too close because of the way that Tyrese Halliburton was just operating the offense, getting guys open. They were hitting shots. Pascal Siakam ends up with 30 points. Tyrese has 32. Siakam's big down the stretch. The biggest three come from Pascal and Obi Toppin. Toppin's was the dagger, and Pascal's was like the Knicks got it back down to 6. They looked to be going on a run, and Pascal just buries a 3, which was massive, because I think Bridges goes down and hits another 3, and then the Pacers answer back with a Toppin, so 3. So the Pacers just never they never folded in the fourth quarter. I think after game 3, there was definitely some nerves. You could tell in the fourth quarter that when the Knicks started to go on their last run that they did, when they got it down to 6, you could tell there was some uneasy moments in the building, and some uneasy feelings. But ultimately, the Pacers did what they were supposed to do behind the leadership of Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton made a really nice steal in I think it was the third quarter, where he was playing really good defensively. And then he would just make really solid defensive plays. In the fourth quarter, he picks off, I think it was a pass from Brunson to Towns, or it was a temp pass from Brunson to Towns. And again, he did things tonight that just changed the game completely. He had 4 steals, 15 assists, 12 rebounds, and 32 points. And that brings me to what I want to talk about as far as just how historic he was tonight, because these are some really interesting stats. So in this series, Tyrese Halliburton is he averages 24.3 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, 11 assists per game, 2.5 steals per game, and a true shooting percentage of 57.7. He is the only player in history of the NBA regular season and playoffs, the only player, I reiterate that, to ever have 30 plus points, 15 plus assists, 10 plus rebounds, 5 plus threes made, and no turnovers. Tyrese Halliburton had no turnovers tonight. And we've had many stats that have had that same kind of thing, and we'll get to that here soon. But the next thing I want to read, players with 30 points, 15 assists, and 10 rebounds in a playoff game, there's a list of 3. Oscar Robinson, Nikola Jokic, Tyrese Halliburton. Games in NBA history with 30 plus points, 15 plus assists, 5 plus 3-pointers made, and 0 turnovers. So bringing that stat back up again. In the regular season and playoffs, the rest of the NBA and NBA history, 0. 0 times has a player in NBA history had over 30 plus points, 15 plus assists, 5 plus 3-pointers, and 0 turnovers, except for one person, Tyrese Halliburton. And you know how many times he's done that? 3 times. He's had 3 games of 30 plus points, 15 plus assists, 5 plus 3-pointers made, and 0 turnovers. He's done it in the regular season and in the playoffs, and he's the only player to ever done it, and he's done it 3 times. It's incredible. I mean, just his ability to do things like that for a point guard that is a past first point guard, to have 15 assists with 0 turnovers, the valuing of that possession and the ball, it's just unheard of. Like, you can ask anybody that's ever played this game. That's unheard of. You don't pass that much. You don't score that much without turning the ball over some. You just don't. It's just unheard of. So again, he's the only player to ever done that, and he's done it 3 times. It's just, it was a phenomenal game. And John Halliburton's back in the building, and he was going crazy in his suite, as he should. His son had one of the best performances in Pacer playoff history. And you could mark it up there with what Reggie used to do in the playoffs, because I just don't remember if there's ever been a night where I felt like somebody was this good for the Indiana Pacers. And, I was on the tail end of Reggie's postseason stuff, and I wasn't around. I was around, but I wasn't old enough to remember his times playing against the Knicks in some of these series. But just unbelievable what he did tonight. 11 to 23 from the field, 47%. He was 5 of 12 from three at 41%, 5 of 6 from the free throw line, 83%. He was a plus 16. Aaron Nesmith actually led the team in plus minus with plus 20 on an injured ankle. I mean, just the performance and grit and toughness that Aaron Nesmith plays with, to play 32 minutes on a bum ankle and have a plus minus of 20, score 16 points. I mean, the guy was just crazy in tonight's game, along with Pascal Siakam too. And the next person I really want to mention in the rundown, because I've just mentioned Pascal. Pascal had a great night, hit some great threes, was crucial down the stretch, hit some real big shots. But the person that really stepped on the pedal, second, third quarters, fourth quarter, Benedict Mathurin. We've talked about it, right? We've talked about where's Ben? Where has he been? Where's Ben been? Right? National media was all over him. He wrote a Player Tribune article, and he kind of alludes to, just the expectations and how he's going to do more, and he promises the fan base he's going to do more. And you're going to see, well, we saw tonight, Ben. We saw it tonight. 62% from the field on 5 of 8 of shooting, 10 of 11 at the free throw line at 90%. And he had 20 points in 12 minutes and 30 seconds. That's crazy stuff. He had 2 assists and 2 rebounds as well. He was great. You don't win that basketball game if Benedict Mathurin's not as good as he was tonight. What a tremendous help that is off the bench. And it's going to help in this series going forward. And if the Pacers get to an NBA Finals series against the Thunder, having that off the bench is going to help us keep up with what the Thunder can do, because the Thunder can absolutely score off the bench like crazy. They're going to need Benedict Mathurin to score, or they don't really stand much of a chance in that series. It's going to be very important for Ben to be involved. And tonight he did things in the flow of the offense. He really made some nice passes out. He made the one pass out to Pascal. That was a big 3. He just did everything right tonight. He was mentally tough. He got into it with Brunson a little bit and stirred Brunson up a little. I think he got into the heads of the Knicks some. He just comes with this passion and this intensity that if he can corral it and he can score, he's just going to be an absolute killer in this league. And tonight you saw the flashes of what Benedict Mathurin can be. Just that assassin at the end of games or in crucial moments when they need you the most. Benedict Mathurin can deliver it. What a game for him. What a game for Tyrese. What a game for Pascal, Aaron. Just unbelievable performance from all 4 of them. And the Pacers, again, take a 3-1 lead into Game 5 against the Knicks, Madison Square Garden on Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, my last talking point here says depth, death, and taxes. Basically, wash, rinse, repeat. The Pacers' depth is once again the reason why the New York Knicks are oftentimes scratching their heads as to what is this Pacer team doing to us? How have they been able to do this 2 years in a row? It's the depth. It's the ability to keep punching you and punching you and punching you from different directions. And I'm not just talking about bench depth. I'm talking about 1 through 5. This team is made of dogs. This team is made of fighters, scorers, people that can attack you from every which direction, score in different places. It's just a nightmare of a team to try to defend. They are the best offense in this postseason for that reason, and the best team in the playoffs so far as records concerned because of that. The Pacers have a chance to have eliminated every single one of their opponents in 5 games. And I don't know what the record is, but I'm pretty sure that's probably up there with the least amount of games needed to get to the NBA Finals. I mean, I think the Celtics probably make that argument too last year. I can't remember what exactly they did. I know they swept the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, but the Pacers are not playing as many games as these other teams. They're well rested. They've got a lot of depth. They've got one of the best offenses in the whole league when it's going. And they're going to be a challenge for anybody they have to face coming up. And it's going to be a challenge for the Knicks to come back in this series. I do think realistically the Pacers could end this in 5. I still have Pacers in 6. I still feel like the Knicks have a little bit more of a fight left in them. There's going to be some pressure if the Pacers have to play a game 6. But again, early on in my preview, I said the Pacers could win this in 5. I wouldn't be shocked. But I'm going to go Pacers in 6 just to be safe. And I'm going to continue to stay safe there. And I'm not going to change my opinion because I feel like that's cheating. But could the Pacers take game 5? Absolutely. There's a ton of pressure on the Knicks. Like, this is do or die. This is going back home in front of that crowd that I think thought they're going to come back 2-2 in this series. And the Pacers once again have the chance to go into the Garden and rip the soul out of this Knicks team. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited for that chance. I can't wait to see the game on Thursday. If you listen this far into the podcast, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. What a great game this was from wire to wire. Great performances from OG Anunoby, Towns, and Brunson. Again, this starting lineup is one of the best starting lineups in the league in the Knicks, and the Pacers have handled them pretty well. So excited about game 5. We'll see what happens. I will have a preview show that comes out later on, probably on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, that you can listen to get yourself ready for game 5. It'll probably be a little bit of a shorter episode just because I don't think there's as much to talk about leading into this game 5, except the Pacers just got to go in and handle business in the Garden, put all the pressure on the Knicks to do everything right. And I think they can come away with that victory there and continue their success on the road in this postseason. So again, thanks for listening along. If you're watching over on the YouTube channel, again, the Pacers Fever Show, subscribe, like, comment, let me know what your predictions are for the rest of the series. Who do you hope to get in the NBA Finals if we get there? Do you think we get to the NBA Finals? Do you think we close out the Knicks? Do the Knicks come back? How many games do you have in this series? Can the Knicks push it to a game 6 or 7? Anything's possible. This Knicks team is still very good. They're going to be very desperate and hungry, and they still have a game in the Garden left and could have 2 if things do not go well. So we'll see. Pacers are not done yet, but you feel really good about what the Pacers have done tonight because they are 1 win away from their first NBA Finals appearance since the year 2000. And we are going to have the conversation, hopefully, can the Pacers win their first NBA title? So that's all coming up on the next couple of episodes, and we will recap game 5 after the game on Thursday, and then whatever happens from there as well. The NBA Finals would start next Thursday, I believe. June 5th is when that is. So those that are keeping tabs on that. But yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. Go ahead and rate, give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Helps people find us as well. But yeah, thanks again for watching. I'm really excited about this. This is the most excited I've ever been as a Pacer fan, and I can't wait to continue to watch this team and cover this team. What a great night for the Indiana Pacers, again, as they're just 1 win away from the NBA.